And we think, no, our parents are just saying that we should eat this. Nothing would actually benefit us. And it's something that I view as myself. I don't know lie. When I was young and I was told to eat my veggies, and I didn't see the point of eating them because it's just food. And now, in terms of you spoke about gut, and something that I feel like in a way this conversation is longer than I expected, and yeah, but nevertheless, in terms of people have, I would say professionals have different approaches when it comes to autism in terms of, I would say treating it autism. So what are the innovative approaches you developed or employed in treating autism? How do these differ from traditional methods?
From how to do traditional methods or non-traditional?
Oh,
Okay. So I think that, addressing from a traditional standpoint, I've seen, people that do medications, normally people have done stuff like Sporanox. So Sporanox is actually an antifungal that's very, very popular in the Indian population with reducing the amount of fungus that's basically present inside the gastrointestinal tract. Caprylic acid, which is actually something to help knock out candida, is something. There's also Dr. Nemechek, who has the Nemechek protocol, which is a diet that's going to be in low carbs, inulin, Jerusalem root, omega 3s, and something called vagus nerve stimulation. So basically, what he's designed to do is to really starve the source of fuel, which is carbs, for all the bacteria and the yeast present into the gut. Fish oil to dampen the inflammation. Inulin and Jerusalem root, that's going to be a prebiotic fiber to basically kind of help feed the good probiotics in the gastrointestinal tract. And then this thing called vagus nerve stimulation, which the vagus nerve is this nerve that comes from the brain stem, an area called the medulla, that's going to innervate how the immune system and how the body detoxifies. I think those are pretty good traditional approaches. Then you go into non-traditional or alternative approaches. Yep. And this is where these doctors are actually going to, like myself, we're going to use photobiomodulation. We're going to use red light over the gastrointestinal tract. Maybe we're going to use something called the violet light, which is going to help reduce some of the pathogens, some of the infections that potentially are present into the gut. We're going to do stuff, again, the vagus nerve, like the Nemechek protocol. We're going to do vagus nerve stimulation to help out with the body, to help detoxify, strengthen the immune system, and even help improve the gastrointestinal tract, because that's the nerve that innervates the digestive system. We also look at, again, diet changes. So low carb diets. You can actually look at food sensitivity. So eating foods, you can do a blood draw to see, make sure that, people aren't eating even natural foods that could be causing, issues. Peptide therapy. So there's stuff called BPC 157, body protective compound, butane, PEA. Peptides are basically a derivative of protein. So the peptide's like a new whole thing going on in biohacking world, also in functional medicine world. And then the other thing is actually looking at, well, we can even talk about the circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm actually does have an impact on the gastrointestinal tract. And so what happens is these kids need to make sure that, one, they're not eating after sundown, because that can actually slow the digestive system down. The other thing is actually just looking at animals. So an animal doesn't need to be taking all these vitamin and minerals, and an animal does not need to go to a veterinarian. As long as what happens that animal is it typically wakes up, early in the morning and watches the sunrise. And then after the sundown, it typically goes and it hibernates, kind of, relaxes. And the sunset and sunrise is very, very powerful, because there's research that shows something called Amerkin cells, these receptors in the eye, that when light triggers it, and they're actually showing that violet light, the UV light beam from the sun, has actually been able to reduce pathogens. So think about an animal gets sick. An animal can eat rotten meat, and that animal doesn't really get sick, but that animal's outside in the sun all day long. And the sun is very therapeutic. And so I'm a very big fan of actually sunlight to the abdomen area, which is why I use red and violet light to the stomach clinically with my patients. But I also do encourage people that, aren't my patients that are listening to this, that if you ever go to the beach and you lay out, in the sun, you actually feel good.
Mm,
And it's because of the sun actually is putting energy in and actually reducing the amount of pathogens present inside the gastrointestinal tract. And
mm.
you look at autistic kids, they're not outside wanting to lay on a beach. They're playing on video games inside under artificial light.
Mm, mm. And in a perspective of autism, what dangers are there when one uses artificial lighting?
Okay, well, the research, I would say that research that I've studied, not specifically on autism, but just looking at, again, they're looking at insects and stuff, but Harvard has the circadian rhythm biolab, and they're showing what's happening to animals and insects that are being exposed to excessive blue light, that they're actually having higher inflammatory markers. They're also seeing degeneration actually in degenerative markers. So the other thing is that, blue light has been shown to increase cortisol. So if you increase cortisol, that's going to increase your stress response. And so an increase in stress, you don't rest and digest.
Mm,
The other thing that's very interesting is that excessive blue light also reduces the ability to break down carbohydrates. So if all these kids are basically playing video games in an under artificial light and not outside in the sun, one, and they're eating carbohydrates, they're not going to be breaking them down. Again,
mm,
that turns into a potential breeding ground for, dysbiosis, abnormal bacteria. And the other thing is vitamin D levels. When we run blood draws, these kids actually all have low vitamin D, but they're not outside playing. And vitamin D can be considered, a neurosteroid because vitamin D is very impactful for the brain. It also is, a function with the liver. The liver basically is going to take light from the sun, put vitamin D together.
mm,
So you get vitamin D deficiencies from excessive blue light.
mm. And it's something that one thing that I've learned today is the fact that sunlight is very important when it comes to circadian rhythm. And it's something that I seen in a way, actually have learned. Let me not say I've learned. And I feel like I believe that you are my third guest when it comes to circadian rhythm because I believe that and I feel like a little information when it comes to that because when we think about light, and for example, you spoke about red light in terms of and blue lights, and to me, when I think about those LED lights, it's the fact that so if those lights are for decorations, and that's what I know they are known for. And for example, one of my friends usually uses the red lights because when you buy them, they come in different colors, whereas I think there are 3 or 4 colors, I'm not quite sure. But most of the time he uses the red ones. And definitely I'm quite sure that he doesn't know what actually that red light assists him in a way of actually sleeping. And one thing that I realized also I've learned actually with circadian rhythm is the fact that it helps with sleep. And with when it comes to sleep, there are so many, I would say, the factors that play a role in it. So what have in it within your practice, what are some of those factors that actually you have seen within your practice?
Well, I'll give you an example. Like I had a patient with chronic insomnia, and this guy he was medicated for 15 years. And when I did a case history, coming to find out this guy was a CPA, he worked indoors. I asked him, how often he's outside in the sun, and he said, "Well, I only go into the sun to basically get in my car and go to work, and then when I get home, that." And I'm like, "So you get no sunlight?" He goes, "No, no, no. Matter of fact, I actually put sunshades even on my house." So he's
Mm,
because he had a problem with sleep. And I'm like, "So you spend your whole entire life basically indoors?" And I asked him, "So what do you do when you get home from work?" And he says, "Well, I just turn on TV. I watch watch television." I'm like, "Okay, well, I want to tell you something. You're going to think I'm crazy, but if you turn around and you actually look up circadian biology, that I think that you could actually restore your sleep cycle by altering your light." And this guy's like, "No one's ever told me this concept." And I said, "No, no, no. What I want you to do is I want you to think about an animal. Does an animal need to take, sleep medication to go to sleep? No.
Mm.
That animal literally is going to basically be outside. And I told him about Albert Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, energy equals mass times the speed of light.
Mm.
I said, if you break that down into a quantum level, you have energy equals mass of every cell in the entire body times the speed of light, but the diversity of colors. So
Mm.
you're only being exposed to the color blue under artificial light. I want you to work on getting a diversity of colors, because this guy was even having to drink caffeine. He was drinking coffee. Like, I think he was drinking like 10 or 12 cups of coffee a day to stay up. I mean, this guy couldn't sleep. And then he has no energy. So he's wired and tired. Well, why is he wired and tired? Is because his light, and that's my clinical opinion. So what happened is I told him, I said, look, do this for 2 straight weeks. I want you to wake up. I want you to watch every sunrise and sunset. Go outside on the weekend. I want you to basically get sunlight. And I wrote this in one of my books, like, I think it was like 5 years ago. And this guy literally comes back in 2 weeks. And I walk in the room like, well, and he goes, this is the most craziest thing. He's like, I've literally been sleeping. And I'm like, did you listen? He goes, I can't believe it was something this simple that changed my whole entire life. I mean, 15 years of not being able to sleep. And it wasn't the drugs. It was literally the fact that this guy was not being exposed to light. So that's one case. The next thing is that I have a young girl with pediatric encephalitis where she was having multiple seizures on a daily basis, and they couldn't figure out what was going on with her. And her head was really swollen. And so I told the dad, I said, what I want you to do is I want you to actually, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I want you to start getting your daughter outside. And I want her to be able to, like, sunrise. Guys just go out for a walk when the sunrise comes up and then the sunset. And then even what I'd like for you to do is 30, 45 minutes a day. I'd like for you to get her outside, get her in a bathing suit, and actually get sunlight to her face and to her stomach. And you could imagine, as a doctor telling a parent this their child has, encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain. Now, again, this has been going on for 2 years with this young girl. And now we have this little girl fully coherent. She's actually walking. She was in a wheelchair. Now she's walking, and she's also like saying words. Now, was it just the light? No, no, no. But this had a massive implication to reducing the inflammation. And you got to go back to, I feel like in healthcare, we've made everything so complex that we've kind of abolished that life is really actually simple. And you just look at how an animal survives in the wilderness, because we're actually, Homo sapiens are actually an animal in the animal kingdom. And we're not living by the laws of nature because we live indoors, we're on phones, we're eating horrible foods, and we're not eating foods that we should be eating that are real. I tell people eat like, foods that plants create or animals, not, plant-like products or plant made in factories. We need real food, and we need to be getting sunlight, and that's going to energize us. Look, there's the energy drink market is like massive. Why? Because people have no energy. Look at anxiety, depression, and sleep issues, and look at the amount of medications that people are on. Those are problems that people have, mental health. And you look at all those people with mental health and you look at their sun exposure, you're going to see that all those people have very, very little sun exposure.
And it's something that I've seen actually within myself is the fact that sometimes nowadays we are so fixated to our phones that at some point that we actually receiving that artificial light, and at some point that most of us, when we wake up, we don't go straight to the sun. We actually look at our phones, look on social media, and we are so addicted to phones that we don't realize that they are the reason why we actually have that lack of sleeping. And some people end up being addicted to in terms of pills, of sleeping pills. And at some point, it's actually in a way of I'm seeing it in a different perspective, because you are the second person that says that most of the people live indoors. and are not actually exposed by the actual the circadian rhythm. I believe that it's quite an important thing to our conversation.